Hello and welcome to Moneylife News and Views. I'm Debashis Basu. In mid-July last year, there was a company called Car Trade which made an IPO. This is a website to buy and sell used cars and also to get car financing. The initial public offering, or what public issues are called, was priced at 1585. Last week, its stock price closed at 640. Which is a loss of 60% in just 7 months. A couple of months later, that's after Car Trade, came Policy Bazaar, a very well-known website to buy insurance products. Its IPO was priced at 980 rupees. Last week, that stock closed at 524, a fall of 47%. A week after Policy Bazaar came Paytm, the ubiquitous payment platform. Who doesn't know about Paytm, right? This made an issue of 2,150 rupees per share. This was at that time the biggest IPO in India ever. Last week, Paytm's price was 709. That was a fall of 68%. Most other IPOs of last year have met with a similar fate, including the big daddy of them all, that is the Life Insurance Corporation of India. Now, after these kind of losses, many people took to social media to complain bitterly about how these IPOs are being priced and blaming the market regulator as well as the investor, as well as the greedy investment bankers and the companies making these issues. This phenomenon of IPOs quoting well below the issue price is not new. In fact, this is the norm. Why is this so? Because IPOs are often a bad deal for investors. Investors have no control over when they buy and at what price they buy. These are the two crucial elements that determine returns. In an IPO, these two factors are predetermined by the issuer and the merchant bankers. You have no choice. You can just walk away, surely. Now, issuers and merchant bankers or investment bankers or lead managers fix the price to benefit themselves. But then investors ought to have done their homework before making a decision, and they didn't. This is the most common gripe against the investors. Why did you go and buy? Who asked you to buy? Why didn't you do your own homework? Now, they allowed themselves to be influenced by intermediaries, brand, hype, greed, etc. Amazingly, it is the same story every year in every country all the time. Listen to what John Rothschild wrote, who was a financial writer, in his book, A Fool and His Money. This is way back in the 80s, this book. A Fool and His Money, the Odyssey of an Average Investor. He wrote, people who spend a week choosing a furniture refinisher will sign up with the first financial advisor who calls. People who circle junkyards for matching hubcaps will buy mutual funds without reading the prospectus. People who check the expiration date on cottage cheese would not think of investigating the background of the broker. Now here is a thought. This was so in the 80s, this was so in the 90s, this was so 100 years ago, and this has been the story of investors all the time, which basically means that if most investors invariably act like this every time and place, it means that we are all fundamentally flawed as humans when it comes to making financial decisions. We just cannot help it, making these wrong decisions, getting carried away. We seem to be hardwired in a way that forces us to make such mistakes. Indeed, behavioral finance does establish this to be true, with umpteen experiments conducted over the last many decades. Faced with multiple choices, we are supposed to think carefully, but we act impulsively. Now, the antidote to such mistakes is to train our mind. Train how? With financial literacy, with knowledge about history of financial markets and financial products. But financial literacy is not part of any curriculum. Nor are we ever made aware how flawed we are as humans and all our inherent behavioral biases. We only know just a few of them, which is fear and greed and so on, but there are literally hundreds of them. Indeed, no one ever tells investors the most important truth about investing, that it is a battlefield out there and you are on your own. No one is your friend. Hence, it is obvious that making financial mistakes would be the norm, and a diligent, careful, thoughtful, and analytical investor would be a very rare exception. In fact, probably somebody like that doesn't exist. And yet, all regulations are framed with exactly the second type of person in mind, the so-called rational man, who, just like the economists have earlier said, there is an economic man to explain that faced with economic choices, we always make the rational choices which maximize our benefit. That's also untrue. Now, the concept of rational man has led to what is called disclosure-based regulations. The idea is that if I disclose, you're rational, you're going to read it and make up your own mind. But as we know, that human beings are not rational. So this ridiculous regulatory assumption is that investors are supposed to read 500 pages of prospectuses and legalese, think hard, do their own research, probably create financial models, and then decide whether to invest in an IPO or not. Now, nobody does that. If they have not done that, we blame them. You can't complain. Why didn't you do any of these things? But we know that's impractical. Disclosure-based regulations for the rational man is a charade. It's a sham. But it would be hard to dislodge because it is now both a regulatory orthodoxy and serves the interests of everybody on the other side, which is the investment bankers and the issuers, that is the companies. In fact, not only are we likely to continue with this nonsense of disclosure-based regulation, but we are likely to get more of it. Last week, news agency PTI quoted an anonymous senior official of the Securities Exchange Board of India saying that the regulator will harness its huge capabilities, its all sorts of data that it has collected over the decades, and apply cutting-edge technology to analyze things that have gone bad or good for investors. And then it would pass it on to them as risk factor disclosures, more disclosures. It aims to help investors, as it calls it. I mean, this official has been quoted as saying, avoid the herd mentality that has been particularly visible in recent years. Obviously, this senior official doesn't understand that herd mentality is the most common, prevalent thing that has been around since ages, for hundreds of years in markets, not this year. They think that we have seen this herd instinct beginning with the pandemic and also the recent losses sustained by investors in IPOs. This is a new thing for the regulator. It's as old as the hills. In a global first, SEBI aims to assist investors through monthly risk factor disclosure on market trends, including surges and crashes. Well, I can guarantee that nobody is going to read these disclosures. If they read, their decisions are not going to be based on these. All right? It's quite amazing that decades after behavioral finance has shown us the truth about real-life human behavior, regulators cannot stir themselves to drop the rational man assumption and incorporate even a smidgen of that learning. The current disclosure-based system created by regulators does nothing to actually help the investors, but it is investors alone who pay the price for it, not the regulators. Thanks for watching, and if you liked it, please do share and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.